The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise virtually this evening to pursue a question that I asked in this House some months ago with the occasion of a wonderful conference that took place in Ottawa that was called Vote 16. There are movements across this country of people who are wanting to see the voting age lowered to 16 years old. Now, I'm going to canvass very quickly why that is, because the response I received that day from the parliamentary secretary was not to the issue of why it would help make our democracy more vibrant if we were to change the voting age. Some jurisdictions have, and occasionally, for instance, on the referendum in Scotland, the voting age was 16 years old. The problem we have in Canada with voter turnout, and it is a significant problem, it tends to go down over the years. The voter turnout most recently that scandalized me was in the Ontario provincial election, the last one that had something like 46% voter turnout. So fewer than half people who were able to vote actually voted. So that it really is a blow to democracy. The demographic group that votes the least in our country is the group that has the most, if you'll forgive the expression, Madam Speaker, most skin in the game, young people. Young people, the decisions we make in this Parliament, in this House in 2024, are going to significantly affect 16-year-olds for the rest of their lives. Whereas for people of my age and older, there is relatively less of a long-term impact. But young people vote the least. One of the reasons for that, when you look at the research, is that at 18 years old, many Canadian youth are away from home for the first time. They may be away at university, off trying to find a job, make their own way in the world. And they end up feeling, I'm not sure I know enough about this community, this new place I live. This isn't where I'm from. It tends to reduce voter turnout. And we also know from the research that if young people don't vote at their first opportunity at 18 years old, they're quite unlikely to start voting when they're 25 or 30 or 35. We put in place patterns of non-engagement, of non-involvement. Add to that the general disgust in the general public at political partisan games, and you end up having a very real risk of voter turnout continuing to go down. Now, imagine turning that around, which we could still do before the next election, and saying voting age is now legal at 16. 16-year-olds can vote, 16-year-olds can drive, 16-year-olds pay taxes, 16-year-olds can risk their lives in many ways, and we accept that. Why not allow young people to vote at 16 when they're in their home community with the support of peer groups, with the potential for beefed up ethics classes that have so far, and I've heard from many retired school teachers, they feel that, and this is of course provincial jurisdiction, that teaching democracy in schools has gone downhill in civics classes. I misspoke when I said ethics, I mean civics classes. So in the time remaining, the last 30 seconds, let me just say, let's seize the opportunity while we have time to increase the engagement of Canadian youth in the future of our country, to ask young people to step up and start voting at 16. And I think we'll see a positive impact for all of us, including the seniors. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm honoured to rise today in this chamber to talk about the opportunities for youth engagement in our democracy, particularly voting in federal elections. I would also like to thank the member for Saanich Gulf Island for raising the important issue of Canada's voting age. Section 3 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms states that every citizen of Canada has the right to vote, and all citizens do eventually. The Canada Election Act qualifies this right by adding an age requirement that citizens must be 18 years old. This is consistent with the voting age for provincial and territorial elections in most jurisdictions around the world. Madam Speaker, the federal voting age has not always been set at 18. In 1970, it was lowered from age 21, which had been the voting age since Confederation. Since then, Parliament has been has often reflected on the voting age. Indeed, this very parliament debated the idea of lowering the voting age to 16 2 years ago. And while Parliament did not agree to lower the voting age, our government, and the Prime Minister in particular, have made very significant efforts to ensure young people continue to have a voice in our parliamentary democracy. Madam Speaker, I would like to highlight a few of the many opportunities available to youth for engaging in democratic life and all levels of government. For example, they can become active members of political parties, and they can join or even launch social movements on issues of importance to them, as well as advocate for public policies. Madam Speaker, our government recognizes that youth participation in our democracy, which is not limited to voting, makes it healthier. This is why we took important steps to provide youth opportunities to participate in our democracy in recent years. For example, in 2018, the government passed Bill C-76, the Election Modernization Act, which created a voluntary register of future electors, providing Canadians between the age of 14 to 17 who wish to vote with the option to register early with Elections Canada. If they chose to sign up early, these youth are automatically included in the National Registry of Electors upon turning 18, as well as the list of electors, so that they are registered to vote and will receive their voter information card. The Election Modernization Act also facilitated the ability of Elections Canada to hire 16 and 17-year-olds to work as election officers, giving young people an opportunity to be at the front lines of Canada's electoral process. Our youth can and do participate in our democracy and continue to make a valuable contribution in a variety of ways. At the same time, our government recognizes that it's important we continue to support ways to encourage participation. All of us here can and should do more to encourage the turnout of all electors. We need to be example for our youth. In March of this year, our government introduced Bill C-65, the Electoral Participation Act, which seeks to enhance voters' participation for all electors, including youth and students.
I'm sorry, the honourable member's time is up. He'll be able to finish up during his 1 minute. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, and I really appreciate that the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary made those points. I mean, clearly, we do appreciate, and I appreciate, the changes to the Elections Act to allow 16-year-olds to pre-register, but nothing's going to have the impact on youth voting like moving the voting age to 16. I even hear from 16-year-olds sometimes. They say, well, maybe we don't know enough yet. And I'd remind all of our colleagues here that we don't cut off the ability to vote and our intellectual capacities. If we happen to be in a long-term care home with dementia, we have the right to vote. Canadian youth have a right to say what needs to be done so the climate of the future is livable. So they have a livable world and a chance to die of old age. A right that we rarely embrace, but one that our kids may be denied. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, our government recognizes that a healthy democracy requires youth engagement. As you know, Parliament has continued to support the current voting age of 18 for a variety of reasons. At the same time, important action have been taken to further foster youth participation, both by the government, by stakeholders, as well as youth-led organization and initiative. However, I would note that voters aged 18 to 24 continue to have much lower turnout than the national average. Our government believes more can be done to make voting easier for these electors, many of whom are post-secondary students. That is why this government proposal to make voter on campus permanent through Bill C-65 it is so important. I want to thank Canadian youth for the continued engagement in our Democracy Institute. Thank you, Madam Speaker.